We're live.
Hello, guys.
I'm here with Steven Stutts. He
Yes.
is a professional test, standardized test teacher.
Yes.
Uh,
Started with the ACT, but soon to move on to the grad school admission tests because that's where the money lies.
mm Definitely. MCAT, LSAT, GMAT, PCAT, GRE. GRE is a big one.
GRE's huge. Yeah, that's what I'm next. That's what I'm focusing on right now.
Okay, so I'd be interested in because you already started discussing this subject, and I was wondering if you'd like to unpackage it for our viewers.
Okay, of course. Just test taking in general and standardized testing, like all about them. I would love.
Well, I've done standardized test teaching a little bit myself. I've focused more on the MCAT. I've done a little bit of ACT, SAT. Haven't really done too much about the GRE. I've done the LSAT. I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts, and I'll chime in and interrupt and be a bore whenever.
So obviously, this will be very affected by my audience and who I'm streaming with. Obviously, so
streaming.
This is who I'm streaming with, like you. So basically, a lot of people. So let's start from like the common perception of standardized tests, right? So like a lot of people hate them, right? Like it's like a big thing. Like people, oh, they're the worst. They're like there's kind of like this negative discourse around them within like younger populations. Kids don't like in general, don't because it's
they go and they put you on the spot.
Yeah, they put you on the bell curve. It's like up here you are. Like no one that's not something people like, or at least because most people want to see themselves well above average and like. Do the math, most people are average. And it's a very, candid and it's clear, right there in front of you and you're being compared and like your future relies on it. So it's a big thing. But for us, maybe, for sort of gifted students who are underachievers, standardized tests are actually like great, amazing for us. So for a lot of our viewers, and obviously for you, like a standardized test, for me, it was like, it saved my high school career almost, right? Like
it's like you can be an underachiever in school and completely blast the standardized test and still get scholarships and admissions, all sorts of places, and you look really, really good.
Yeah, so like, my high school GPA, I was, barely in the top 25 percentile, like barely. And like, if you had just taken my last two years in high school, like there was like a big jump where I just stopped like even doing my work pretty much and doing anything. Like it would have been bad, like really bad. Like most colleges, when they see your GPA in high school, they want to see an upward trend. Like if you like for the Ivy Leagues, my friend who's the Ivy League connoisseur, he's at one. He's at UPenn. He's like, he's like an EG guy who just knows so much about college. He's very verbally loaded, so he goes on College Confidential. And he loves to talk about it. It's this guy. This is something he told me about, like very, very crap. I lost the train. Well, can you roll me back like a little bit?
We were talking about the standardized tests and then grades with age throughout high school. As you're going through your high school career.
So I brought this guy up because this is what he told me because I got my first B or something like freshman year. And I didn't even know I thought GPA was yearly. I was like, oh, I'll get a A next semester. It'll average out. A average. Like, oh, it's by semester. I was like, wait, what? So I was like, oh, there goes my 4.0 out the window for first semester of high school. But he's like, yeah, no, it's okay. And he talks like this is like me imitating. He's like, yeah, no, like colleges, they pretty much like want to see an upward trend in GPA. So like if you have some bad grades now, that's fine. As long as if you go all these later, and then you can explain that in your admissions letter. And stuff like your application, like, hey, I had some poor performance here, but I was learning a lot of things. I learned.
You can tell a story. You can tell a story of, this was my journey to personal development. I was improving myself over time. Like seriously, you can blow smoke up their ass in that way, and lots of people do.
Some cliche narrative about some it's like okay.
I had this problem that was in my way, and I implemented this, and this. And
this is how
I diagnosed the problem. I figured it out, and I was a problem solver. And then you go and tout yourself as a problem solver, as opposed to the fact that you were a lazy ass that got his act together.
Just did worse, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, admissions essays, that's a whole topic in itself. But so like my grades were not good. Like they're pretty bad. And like, you know, when you're going to college, like college is obviously like this. Everyone knows it's extremely expensive these days, and you know it's competitive for scholarships, and you know you want to have you want ways to create edges. So there are people who will like they'll dedicate their whole high school life into tons of extracurriculars, like all these clubs and like, kind of superfluous things. And then on the other hand, you'll see people, this is what I love to see, is the ones who are really good at like one particular thing, and that they set themselves apart with like being like a national science fair winner or something, or like a math competition guy. Like I look quite highly upon the people who are specialized in one thing but so good, like at a national level at it, right? But of course, it just integrates well with my worldview and how I think what people should be doing and stuff like that. So, in general, like people will be doing all this fluff, to increase their resume, like to be competitive and stuff. But there's there's the two blanks, right? The GPA and the standardized test. Mm-hmm. So the GPA really, from school to school, that varies a lot as well. There's a huge variance, like. When we're trying to make some kind of pseudo meritocracy that that academia is, we need some action, like as in like objectivity, not objections, but like essentially like GPA is not a great like measure of objectivity, especially when it's not weighted or anything. Like my school didn't have weighted GPA, so your art class that you just paint with your dick or something. It's worth as much as your advanced math and science stuff. Like, it's weighted the same. Like PE, like there were over 20 people with 4 O's in my class of 300, right? Like that's ridiculous. It removes all meaning from, like, when you're the valedictorian, the 4.0, that should matter a lot. Like that should have a lot of merit to it, because you should be the best in your school, and regardless of your intellect. Like having the top GPA in a competitive school where there's only one winner, like that is like an achievement, right? And like something of merit, right? But a lot of schools have like a bunch of like there's just so many other variables when it comes to grades, like school difficulty, etc. That two valedictorians from each other are not. They look different, right? Like very different. So a valedictorian from my school could get mixed in with a valedictorian from an actual school that like really does. That where it matters. So it's bad. So so voila, here we go. Right into the standardized test. We need, like, basically you need something to compare, like something to as objectively as possible, sort of compare the ability of applicants or, whatever. Okay, hey, can this guy take our curriculum? Is this someone we want to like develop? Is this, a mind we want to cultivate or whatever? Or, that might be one of the prestigious universities, intuition. Maybe some others are just like, hey, who should we weed out? Like, we want to cut out, like, if someone has a 16 on the ACT, we don't want them coming to our school. That's a waste of our resources and stuff like that. And just wasted that person's time. So it's necessary, right? So for me, it helped a lot, like, right? Because I had pretty much paltry everything, and I never wanted to go to an Ivy League school, but I was like, yeah. My dad's like, yeah, you want to go to Princeton? I was like, no. Like, I mean, it'd be cool, but like, I'm not gonna get in. But so this stayed me. Like at my university, I have like the top merit-based scholarship package. 30 people get it out of the 8,000 in my year, and like it's just this. Because I walked into admissions like worried that I would not get a scholarship. And they're like, yeah, like no one with your score has ever been denied this scholarship. So I was like, oh, like it is, it's a way to kind of like shove yourself into school, and have, it's a good way to get a benefit, right? Especially for the kids who don't fit well into school, and like still, but obviously are deserving of a good education and like have potential, and they have something to provide. So the standardized tests, like, while in popular view, they might have like lots of negative stereotypes and connotations about them. Like in this setting, like I like standardized tests a lot. Like I'll say that there's a reason I went into teaching them, and the reason I take them and I want to take more and improve and etc., teach more. Obviously, there's a huge monetary incentive. I'm not going to just sit that. Like, that's the main incentive is monetary.
People want to do well on the test. People will pay to do well on the test because their future's on the line. Wow.
And scholarships.
Who would have thought? Like, and you completely destroy the test. Well, people want you to teach them.
Exactly.
And then bonus points for being an actual teacher, being good at what you do.
Yeah, exactly.
The score is what matters.
What's funny is my trials and tribulations, what I'm teaching now, the ACT, do not shape at all how I teach. Like, I walked into the test when I was, 15 and like did really well. And it was like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I didn't have any specific prep. I didn't really have much advice. My first post on Quora actually is I think I deleted it, but it was like kind of this, it was kind of trite, I guess. Mm-hmm. That's how I would describe it. Like, some advice, because I was like, I wanted to write something on Quora. I had never written anything, and you know how it is. You're one of those people just reading through Quora a lot, and you're like, maybe I could try out some of this writing. I was like, what can I write about? I was like, well, what about me is something that like people might draw value from? I was like,
what are some superlatives about Steven?
Yeah, exactly. Boom. I was like, well, I did really well in the ACT, and people care a lot about that test, like a lot. So I'll write an answer, and I basically was like, well, at the end of your practice tests, you should check over your answers and internalize your mistakes, right? Like, that's what I said, basically. I was like, when you miss it, I said it's more important it would be better for you to take one practice test and just go very meticulously over all your mistakes and internalize them than it would be to 10 and then grade it and be done. Like, and that might not actually be true for you.
Is.
Like, I don't know. But anyway. But that's what, I assumed it was true. And so I just said that. And then, I said mental warm up. Like, I was doing some mental math and stuff on my way to the ACT, some countdown problems. I was like, well, it's good to be mentally learned. But again, this is all like none of this is like profound advice. Like, it's not like, oh, you do this. One thing I thought of during the test while I was taking it I was like, oh, this is a good idea. Like, while I'm taking the test, I was like, well, I'll mark the answers I'm unsure of. Then when I come back to them, I'll only have 3 questions and 15 minutes left instead of trying to work it all out now, taking time away from other questions and having a lot more stress build up as the question progresses and I'm not getting the answer. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, this is a good idea. And it worked really well, right?
Yeah, you look at the question, get frustrated, mark, move on to the next one.
Yeah. And then I come back at the end of the second and I have like 15 to 20 minutes left. And I'm like, well, I have 2 questions that I'm unsure about. Let me spend a lot of time thinking and just have no stress because I have so much time.
Yeah, and it's not like in that situation, one question isn't weighted more than another.
Exactly, and yes, that's really important. Is that they're all the same, so it doesn't matter. Like, the order, essentially, in a mathematical sense, the order doesn't matter, right? Like,
well, in the GRE it does. In the GRE it does.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes, the GRE actually does this thing where it selects your question based upon how well you've done in your previous question, so you can't skip. So basically tries to get you to a ballpark.
Oh, no, are you sure that's not the GMAT? I think that's the GMAT.
Maybe the GMAT.
Because the GRE, like, at least I know
either way, it's one of those that starts with a G that does that. I'm pretty
I know sure the GMAT does that.
I'm pretty sure.
And
I'm pretty sure. And I haven't seen any GRE
as well. Practice. Okay. If it does, I was unaware, but I know it's
whichever one you do on the computer, whichever one of those you do on the computer. I'm pretty sure the GRE does.
Well, the thing is, you do both.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure at least the GRE does that. But anyhow, for the ACT, for the SAT, for any of the paper-based tests, 1 point is 1 point. And I'm sorry, I just figured that I would throw that in there just to say that the advice that you give for different tests sometimes winds up being different.
Yes.
But okay, Captain Obvious just entered the room.
Right. But yeah. So essentially, and for most of these tests, I feel like order doesn't matter. Like, most of the multiple choice, like, it's. So yeah, just do is answer the ones you can't answer, and then when you have questions, you want to save the ones you can't answer for the end. It's more efficient, gives you more time.
Yeah, and then you can, if you can eliminate answer choices, do that, because ultimately, let's say you have 5 or 10 questions, and you're able to narrow it down to 2 answers apiece, then you're going to get probably 5 points out of them.
Yeah, and
then if you do educated guessing, then maybe more. If your education sucks, then less.
Right. If it's really a coin flip for you, yes. But
hold on, let me dig in my pocket.
Alrighty, I'll pick and see. Well, oh my god, but
I thought that would be so fun to do.
I'll take every question. I
thought that would be so fun to do, is just go look at it.
A heads. I do every question that way. You know, a heads is a 2 and a tails is a 1, and you know, and if it lands on the edge, it doesn't count for anything. So if I
leave that question blank,
and I get 2 tails, and it's and then I answer D, and if I flip it one, like no, it's like coin flip situations. I think are really rare actually, but like where it's an actual coin flip. Usually they're pretty much nearly every time, unless the test taker makes an error, which happens. It does happen.
Mm-hmm.
And especially you'll notice with different prep materials, there'll be less or more errors in the test. So like of the GRE practice I've been doing recently, I found like some weird errors in the test that are like just obviously error. They're like, yeah, no, you got it wrong. C is the answer because it has the word explanation. I was like, well, explanation was the answer for A, and C was a completely different word. So I think you got it wrong there. And there'll be stuff like that. But in general, there's not actual coin flips. Like there's a right answer. But yeah, so I teach like for what I'm tutoring someone, for example, what matters most for me, like I pick my students very, very specific. Like they have to be pretty high scorers already, and I'm gonna like help them perfect their craft, right? I think I'm much more useful to someone who scores pretty highly, like high 20s, low 30s, for example, and is like just like needs some things ironed out so they can get that really high score.
Wants to get the edge, wants to be able to.
Yeah, right. I'm not gonna someone who has a 17. There's plenty in this tutoring platform I use. Like I don't know what I'm gonna be able to, like they have many fundamental things that it's like reinventing the wheel. Right. Like it's like, well,
it's like, what were these last 10 years of school for, buddy?
Yeah, exactly. I was like, well, what have you been doing? Because I was doing nothing in class and I picked this up. I don't know what. And there's a lot of students I knew who paid attention.
Class time prostate massage with thumb.
Yeah. Prostate. That's what I do. But yeah. So essentially, there'll be like I pick my students like to high scores. Like the one I recently helped, for example, had really high scores in all sections but one, where he did like an outlier score. He's like, yeah, I got like a 24 in this section. But then we did practice tests and he was getting like low 30s at first and then to high 30s towards the end, like at the end of our whole tutoring thing. And it was quite obvious. I was like, yeah, you're like he missed like 2 on the science last time we took it, or 2 or 1 question, and they were like stupid mistakes, like no conceptual errors. And this is someone who scored a 24, which is like missing a lot more than that. So it was more consistency. So I fixed this consistency a little bit, and hopefully he does a lot better on this one. But as a teacher, I enjoy, like I'm actually like consider myself at least a half decent teacher, so I understand conceptually like all the like the content of the exam, and I can explain intuition behind like question design and like adjectives and the answers and stuff in the wording and stuff, and like little like test taking nuances I can actually help with. It's but like for example, I'm not going to teach a student that like as I said, need to reinvent the wheel. Like they don't know anything. It's a waste of time. But yeah, so standardized tests. So now I want to go a little bit to like kind of like same theme, but like more an interesting, like just kind of more intricacies about them, I guess. So obviously the thing that's like standardized tests are trying to measure, like they're trying to measure ability, and one thing as a consequence.
I love how you're like, standardized tests try to measure ability.
Yes,
because Captain Obvious isn't present at all.
They do. Yeah, and because so obviously in this group, the Captain Obvious cap is a little bit different than it might be in other groups. people like, because people might you might ask like, oh, doesn't every standardized test say not to be an ability test? Isn't it not an IQ test? Isn't it not this, that? Every single one. That's because its ability is a very, and this is one thing I think, this is what I'll just go ahead and posit this, not sure if it's true or not, but I sort of think that like that's at least I'm speaking of for the US, sort of our, like the American dream, like that idea is just so like romanticized and just so like it's just so well loved in our country, like hard work and stuff, and like being the underdog and stuff, and like that is just such a like,
hard work pulling through, getting a middle class lifestyle.
Right, it's a part of our national identity, right? Like again, if you look at where we started from, right, like we're kind of the underdog story, pretty much, and that's such a huge thing in our culture. And yeah, hard work paying off, and just dedication, and like these are things that are very like laudable qualities, right? But so this is
they're insufficient in and of themselves, especially in today's society, to get ahead. Maybe in an agrarian society where you really didn't have much in the way of tools, then you wind up having, in the short run, people who can work hard, getting ahead. But that one guy in the corner of the barn that you can't get to work because he's working on that darn newfangled contraption is going to be changing the world.
Exactly. And yeah, so there are paradigms within which hard work can really set you apart, like really, but then there's some where there's a limit, like it's a threshold, and this is something. Well,
if you're working hard to move a pile of dirt from A to B on Monday, B to A on Tuesday, A to B on Wednesday, B to A. I mean, the only way that's going to do is but there are situations where people that would otherwise be making a net negative contribution, if you give them a pile of dirt to move, at least they're not doing that.
Right.
But
this reminds me of a story you told me recently. But yeah, so the idea of natural and ingrained ability and that sort of thing is very, it's like, kind of taboo. It's juxtaposed with this American dream. Like, it's like, well, except for American dream works, except for when hard work, it can't stand alone, essentially.
You need to work. You need to work hard. You need to work smart, and you need to work long. That combination is a killer combination. But if you're missing one of those elements, you're really going to have to be careful what field you pick, because if you think that you're going to get by with just your smarts without hard work, or just hard work without your smarts, no. Or just putting in the time when you're, instead of getting experience, you're getting, instead of a year's worth of experience in an internship or something, you're getting 2 weeks of experience. 25 times over or so, 26 times over.
Right.
No.
So yeah. And so essentially, when so there's like this kind of this sort of unhappiness, and like when looking at standardized tests, like they're seen as very they don't, like, you obviously can do better in practice, but like it's a very big outlier of someone who jumps more than I think probably 3 to 4 points would be like, which is about a standard deviation. Like, that's not common in general. Like, you don't see that very often. It's situations where you do is usually like, it's like, oh, they were ADHD and then they got medicated.
And they got medicated. Yeah, exactly. You wind up having whatever the actual impediment is. Or
like,
was living in an abusive household, moved out to someplace else, was actually able to sleep at night without worrying about getting the crap beaten out of him, was able to have a real diet, was able to lower stress levels, lower cortisol levels, have a better life, and be able to sit down and take a test. Yes, that I've seen, and it's very sad. Very, very, very sad situation.
Exactly. So
so there are legitimate,
like that.
but those are the exception as opposed to the rule.
But generally, we're gonna do controlled situations here, where it's like, okay, let's assume
it's like good luck taking the 17 and making it more than a 24.
Yeah, like that's gonna be really hard.
It's like that is insane. If you taking a 17 score on an ACT and making it more than a 24. You got your work cut out for you, and you're going to probably be dealing with things that are on the boundary of understanding, things that someone might just have to take as true, as opposed to actually understanding the underpinnings behind it all.
Oh yeah,
it's kind of like Christian Marcia's answer about the resolution, color resolution.
I'm a person who had a huge jump, but there's reason. So for example, I took it when I was 13 or 14. And I scored 28 on the ACT. But I had taken a practice test at that age as well, and I scored a 33 without timing. There was no timing. And there was an explanation for this. Is basically I had like an inadequate dosage of medicine, and I was not finishing like sections on top. Like I couldn't focus, and I didn't fundamentally, I didn't really know how, I didn't know much about tests or anything. I didn't have any strategy as well. Of course, those are all things too. But for the most part, it's because I couldn't focus. And then there were a few things in math and not math. I figured out most of the math, I think. But there were some things that I had sort of just like rules I had not learned. Like I didn't know the difference between effect and effect, for example, and stuff like that's just stuff or you don't. It wasn't something. So I learned a little more, etc. I took a year later, and my score jumped 7 points, which is unheard of, right? People aren't supposed to jump that high or that much. But it was because of
means that there were some mitigating factors that were removed. Yeah.
So the difference was medication. My dosage was doubled, which is a big deal, and maturity, and then ironing out, and then having a better idea of what the ACT is and stuff, but my processing speed suddenly worked. I could suddenly stay on task. So I was finished before. I went from not finishing the test to finishing in all
now what do I do?
2/3 of the time, yeah.
And then they don't let you go anywhere, so you're just stuck there.
Yeah, so you're sitting there for
you can't pick your nose and flick boogers at the.
Yep, and with a 3-hour test, if you're sitting there idle for an hour, you're kind of bored, but. That's much preferred to not finishing. I think
being bored, they're twitching your legs for an hour or what have you, 2 hours.
Yeah,
it's definitely preferable to being there panicked until the last minute and leaving and having bubbles blank.
Yeah, but this is not so I have a very niche and kind of outlier-ish situation here, obviously. But a 7-point jump is not. Yeah, it's just really rare, extremely rare. I could actually advertise that if I wanted to be quite deceitful and I jumped 7 points. I'm such a I know the secrets of the test. Oh look, I went from a 28 to a 35. You just trust me, and I'll show you how to do the same thing. No, I'm not going to say that.
That would be dishonest. That would be that would be absolutely horrible marketing. You don't do that. No.
I would never want to do that.
But I know there are people. There would be people that would do that.
And what's interesting is that so these standardized tests, if you look at grad school admissions, high school admissions tests, they're G loaded. They're pretty much IQ tests. And obviously each test, they're more weighted in different subtests. Obviously, standardized tests with the time limit and stuff. There's kind of a processing speed threshold. Going on, okay, can you process through information fast enough to finish? That's kind of the threshold. After that, it's more accuracy, which is good, right? That's good. I think that's good from a diagnostic standpoint. That processing speed is important up to a point. It's important. It's it's not something that it's more of this is something else I've also been thinking about today. Is a threshold issue versus a window issue. At least, as I like to call it, I guess. I don't know. I was just thinking today, and basically, so process speed is basically a threshold. There's no once you're at a certain point, it's fine. It's not going to make it too big a difference. Now, so it's good from a test design to not weight it too hard, and so when we look at like these standardized tests and we compare them to actual IQ tests, like there's huge correlations, right? Like the G loading is really significant. ACT and SAT correlations with G are 0.8, which is like a good subtest on the Wechsler. And like, so this is a known thing, right? And the test, if you look at the item, like it's purposely like this. They want like psychometrics is, a century worth of research that's been like, it would be stupid to just throw that under the bus. Not meaning to be ironic, but that would be like dumb to do. So these tests pull from them, and I'm looking at, since I've taken like most of them except for the MCAT. It's interesting. Like LSAT's very verbally loaded, GRE pretty verbally loaded, but in a more discrete fashion. I feel like more like you know it or you don't type questions a lot. Well, the LSAT is more fluid reasoning. ACT having kind of a split between it. Like there's the reading section and the science section, which are both more analytical and fluid reasoning, and sort of like inductive reasoning as well. And then the math and the math, which is obviously a combination of both. You, depending on how you approach it. If you're one of the kids who's like, oh, I saw this in class, I do this, or you're the ones who's like, oh, this is how this would work. It really depends. And then English, which is pretty much also could be a combo of both. It's like, well, I think this, it's either you know it or you don't type stuff, or you could kind of figure it out. And so it's been quite interesting to sort of look at. It's just been interesting to look at, like, when these tests, obviously they're very simple. Like most tests have this reading section that's just analytical reading, and you read passages and stuff. But then there's like LSAT has the logic game section, which is like a bunch of little logic puzzles and stuff like that. It's quite interesting to see how they compare and contrast the different types of tests. So that's, I have no more like really analysis as far as that goes. But I would actually like to talk about like the window and threshold thing, and sort of kind of the problem, especially when looking at like maybe, for example, like gifted populations, or just kind of fringe populations in general, and their sort of problems. So today, I was thinking a whole lot about, for example, variance. I was kind of getting a bit meta today. I was like, thinking about logic itself, thinking about just pretty much just reasoning. Like it was like I have no like specific like title to put what I was thinking about, but it was pretty much just like reasoning, and I was like intuition behind reasoning. And so I was just like pretty much just building intuition and like thinking through things and doing thought experiments and stuff like that, and really like sort of develop I was bored in my class. There's not much else to do. So I was doing that and doing some like practice. Yeah. So I was thinking one statement that I've heard sort of said, and something that like that might it makes sense kind of intuitively to me, but like it might be something that could be new, is that there's more variance among, for example, gifted populations as far as like personality and stuff. Like there's a lot. Like we'll look at these people. We'll be looking at outliers, right? And we're kind of like things become even less predictive among this group. Like gifted people, if you pick like a whole group of gifted people and a whole group of average people, like you'll be able to tell which group is gifted. Like there's just a lot more variance going on.
If you go take everyone from 70 through 130 and look at the variability of their life experience and so on, and then compare it to everyone right of 155.
Yeah. It's
not even close. It's not even close.
It's gonna be huge.
And yes, I do say 70 to 130. Just take that whole gigantic chunk.
Yeah. Just go ahead and take 96% of the population there. Like,
boom. And
you'll see a huge difference. Like it won't be I don't think it'll be like a very small difference. And And so I was thinking this is the exact sort of stuff I was considering, and I was like, well, I can. So I sort of was building. I was trying to just build the intuition behind like the variance. Like I have intuitive sense, but I was like fleshing it out basically. So I started sort of with like, well, one thing I was sort of, and this got me into the threshold versus window thing. One thing
what do you mean by threshold versus window thing?
Yeah. So yes, I thank you. I need the TI or whatever
you need TE to rein in any just a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, essentially, and this I think about education a lot. So that's part of this. Is when trying to, for example, trying to dunk, that's a threshold problem, right? Like you can either dunk or you can't, and being able to jump too high is not a thing. Like I'm not like, oh God, my feet got tangled in the net. Like I can't dunk. Like no one says that, obviously, but like no one's like, oh God, how do I lower my vertical? I want to dunk. Like there's no, like once you get to X height plus X vertical, or X height plus Y vertical, and make them inversely proportional, and that's who can dunk, and you can or you can't, that's a very simple just example of a threshold problem. Now, I'll go to a simple example of a window socks. Well, there's such thing as too big, right? Like I don't want to buy size 20 socks. Like I'm gonna need to buy a way bigger shoe. I'm gonna have so much cloth just sitting around. Like I'm gonna get blisters. It's not gonna be good. But I don't want a size size 6 women's sock either. Like my toe was gonna get into it. Like that's an issue where it's a window, right? You have a window of sizes that you buy, and these issues are much more. These issues are kind of they're categorically different, right? Now, while you could say a threshold issue, or a window issue is just a threshold issue with another threshold issue upside down or something, like that's stupid. I'm going to call them categorically different. And so what we find is,
well, at least in the context that you're talking, yes, they would be.
Yes, and I'm thinking about variance in populations, and education is a better example. Like the last one was a simple example. Nothing was wrong with it, but it's a more pertinent example is like education, right? Like you have kids who are you can be too smart for a school. You can be too dumb for school. There's no, and the assumption is kind of one of the assumptions that might be implicit within like how the educational system is. Well, it is implicit in the education system, and I'll go through this intuition as well. Is that it's they might not necessarily see being too fast at something or too good at something as a problem, right? Because I think the philosophy that sort of the head of our educational institutions and sort of the philosophy that's kind of guided how they work has been one kind of I'd say sort of a little bit not super romanticized and kind of utilitarian and not extremely there's not that there's this obviously the cliche statement, we need education that fits each individual, we want individualized learning, that's something everyone wants, but it's annoying as shit to have to accommodate for every fucking all the variance among the human population. So it's most people, this works for most people, this is good, it's kind of okay, I hope I want to just get I want as many people to be getting decent grades, getting in, funneled into college, funneled in society, etc. We want the X many people to be able to read, etc. It's just a very kind of utilitarian, just okay, numbers. Wow, and when you're looking at variance within an educational paradigm, how they're treated is different. It's treated not only is it sort of goes under the guise of a window problem, right? Per individualized education, everyone gets what they want, right? There's a window for everyone, kind of. But it's really just a threshold approach. They're okay, people below 70 IQ, they are under the threshold. We need to help them, right? so there's no child left behind, special ed, stuff like that.
Well, I mean, that might even be higher, especially for people that have big variance in their own ability. But yeah.
True. So they don't meet the threshold, so they get more accommodations.
Yeah, but then the idea is ultimately that you want to have them in the same classroom with their age peers.
Okay. Right.
Which that's true. I think is a horrible disservice to everyone.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yes. I think the intuition that you want someone to improve.
Yes, you want them to improve,
good.
But the whole idea is they believe the way you do it is by integrating them into a classroom and then just hoping and praying that everything works and writing an IEP and doing lip service in that way.
And the stuff I've seen them work with, I think there's like a whole lot of. I feel like it's it's kind of like almost a little bit patronizing, like sort of like, okay, we want them to get better and catch up to normal work, but we're not actually going to do really much to like. I walk in there, they're doing the days of the week, and like there's some kids in special ed who know the days of the week and are like, I don't need to do this. Like I need other things, but that's also not a homogenous. Like it's a fringe population, right? Like there's more variance among a special ed classroom than there is in an average classroom.
Oh, so yes, and still you're trying to homogenize them as if the banner of special ed can somehow cover every little thing.
Yeah, and it's like no, like so it's a mess, right? It's trying to homogenize this extremely heterogeneous population, like conflicting ideas, like this. It's super. It's a mess, right? But there is special ed, right? Like they see the threshold problem. They're like, okay, these people don't get through the threshold of being able to complete average work. Let's speed it up for them. But there's less. While there is still a pull, there's less of a pull, which makes me think a lot of people, or makes me think it's majority of them see it. Majority of people see it sort of as a threshold issue, or at least. It's more compelling because there's less like for the other the other end of the other end of outliers on the right side of the bell curve. There's gifted programs and stuff, but they're less common than special ed stuff for sure.
Well, of course, because No Child Left Behind, you make it you're making all these different legal things, like people can be prosecuted for not accommodating people appropriately,
right?
If we're not making every effort to make sure that they can be there with their age peers,
and it's much more, with the age peers thing, right? Like much more. That's the intuition behind that is, we want them with. It's like you could make the same argument about a gifted kid who's like, why is this kid sitting in a class? He's reading Shakespeare. Why are you teaching him how to do the alphabet? Like. He's not getting proper educational accommodations, but it's harder to argue. It's like, well, he's ahead of the age peer, so he's doing well.
He's doing fine. He's reached the threshold.
Yes, he's reached the threshold. So no child left behind, but no child get ahead. That's always what I've said as well.
Yes, and ultimately, as soon as people realize the futility of trying to bring the slow ones up to meet the average, the solution is slowing everybody else down and lowering the pass requirements.
Yeah, so that's another thing that I've also seen. That's just bad. So
that's why the ACT is less G-loaded now than it was 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or the SAT.
Or the
ACT has not changed much. ACT hasn't changed much. SAT is the
whichever the one that goes up to either 16, 24, or 16 and did that weird thing.
Yeah.
Which one is that?
SAT had a big.
Yeah.
It's for sure the SAT. Yeah. The ACT has been pretty like. And it was historically like less G-load than SAT. It's been pretty standard. Like it hasn't underwent any really major changes. At the time that I wound up
taking both of them, the SAT was on its way down.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I would say it had already mostly gone because, like, I think before even 99 or something. I don't know. It was before the turn of the century that like these changes had that that I gone to completion.
And at least and then
they changed it again.
The ACT was certainly a harder exam.
And I personally I see the SAT as just ACT with more time, basically. So like that's how it is these days. And I see it as a better exam as it is currently. The original SAT was amazing. I think that's the best. But currently the SAT is just slower ACT. And like the problems I'd miss on SAT is because tricky wording, like it details, right? Like that's one thing I don't like is like I'm not someone who's extremely detail oriented. So like you get punished for sort of like, oh, you read this wrong, or they tried to trick you here or something like that. And it's not like, oh, I fundamentally misunderstood something, but it's, oh, I was going too quickly, or I understood the concept.
And that's actually what I did for all of when I would teach standardized test stuff for my very capable students, the ones that wanted to have the edge, or the ones that were somehow I knew that they were intelligent. There was just something, some extraneous factor holding them back. That was the kind of crap that I gave them. It was nothing but a bunch of trick questions, things that necessitated reading, and if you missed a knot, or if you missed a simple word, or you didn't know the definition of a word because you didn't have the habit of looking up words you didn't know in a dictionary, I was basically a pedantic jerk to them until
you have to, right?
Yeah, until they got, and then they pulled through and they got insanely high scores. But yeah,
exactly. So it is like for me, my first ACT, ACT stuff. The thing is, ACTs, they are straightforward. ACT has a larger breadth in math concepts that they cover, but less tricky wording in both, I think, verbal and math. So it's more like they're not trying to trick you. They're just like, okay, do you understand what's going on, or do you not understand it? Can you analyze, or can you figure it out or not? And I liked that a lot. Like I liked that with someone with ADHD. Like that's just nice. Like the SAT is conceptually like just as easy. It's just if you're going to try to word it to confuse people on purpose. Like for example, a good like logic puzzle is not built off confusing wording. It's built off good premises that require intricate abstract thought. Right? I'm not like, oh, that was such a good. It's like, so for example, if I'm like, can you spell, obstreperous, or some word, I don't know. And I was like, oh, can you spell it? And then they spell the word and you're just like, oh no, it was it. I said, spell it. Like, it's like, that's kind of the sort of like the analogous situation here. It's like, okay, well, we're just trying to make you be more careful. And that's like, I don't know. Like I think that's like much more fluky. I would prefer for them to rely on more difficult question items. Difficult not because they're a trick, but difficult because they're conceptually more rigorous. Like that's very possible. There's a huge potential variance among question types, and you can make quite nice problems that don't rely off lots of basically stuff you already know. It's so I don't know. I like the ACT how it is more, and the science section I think is good. Like it actually is pretty decent science reasoning. Like you read an experiment, it makes you synthesize data, and it's analytical, and it's a good test, I think. Okay, what can you roll back? What were we talking before we had talked about like the structure of the test? Because I think I had something to say.
Well, we were talking about special ed.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to go back into the threshold versus window stuff, and then go back into variance, like kind of tie down these loose ends. But yeah. So obviously, like education, we can see is like a window, right? Like it's like, okay, you can be too fast, you can be too slow. This to me is like, I was leading into like really trying to get behind to the variance of these gifted just fringe populations in general, just lots more variance. And so one of the things I thought of is generally, this is like, I'm starting with like sort of the least significant. That's sort of, I guess, my style, but I think, okay, well, there's probably smaller sample sizes. Like it's hard, as you think of those people north of 155, it's harder to get a group of 10 of them than it is a group of 10 average people. And so like sample sizes could possibly, screw things up because there's just not enough information. But, that also can be corrected for because you can always just increase the N. It might be harder, but that's sort of that's not a conceptual like problem. It's more of like application problem, like it's a mechanical problem, like it's like, oh god, like it's going to be hard to do this experiment because this population is rare. Like that's just a thing, but it can be overcame. Like even when corrected for, I'm sure, like sample sizes, like you're going to see a large variance in gifted like and just fringe populations in general. And so,
but then also due to the nature of the way of thinking, it's not like two people that are highly gifted plus or whatever aren't going to be able to understand each other pretty well.
No, and that's that's another like a nice little interesting thing is that since the fundamental thought, the pattern of thinking is actually very like predictable. Like you're like, okay, they're going to think like this. This is how someone of this level thinks. Now, how they actually are as a person, the personality variance, all that, that's huge. But,
yeah. Personality variance, the things that likes and dislikes, preferences.
Yeah.
What people choose to do with their time, etc. Yeah, there's a big difference. But then ultimately, the process, the way you go about doing things, is something that even if we're doing completely fields that are nearly completely irrelevant to each other, it's not like we'll still be able to have an appreciation for the process that the other person is doing. Mm-hmm. And likely, if we go and jump into doing something that the other person is doing without having seen it, we're just going to be there fumbling around like a fish out of water for like 20, 30 minutes, getting our bearings. Mm-hmm. And then invariably we'll come to doing things in a very similar way to another person that is of similar intellect.
Yeah, and that's one thing my dad's, for example, my dad's coworkers always were like bewildered about by him, is he would sit in, like they have talks. There's lots of talks at universities. Like lots of people come and talk about the research from many different areas, etc. And they said he just always had intelligent questions about like random stuff that none of it was like they're like, we didn't get anything out of that. Like you knew nothing, and you just suddenly you have like two really great questions to ask, and like it's like you're an expert or something in the field. It doesn't make sense. And my dad has the worst explanation. Like he's someone who's painfully like. For example, he's someone who's painfully like not like undermining themselves. Like he's the ADHD poor processor who just thinks they're dumb. Like just doesn't actually think that. Like he knows he's smart, but like underestimates himself like very severely. Mm-hmm. And like if you read his teaching evaluations, you'll see like he's like they're like, yeah, he's incredible. He's like he doesn't know how to teach. Like he's just not going to be able to teach them. There's obviously a communication gap between him and his students, and he struggles to, think when people don't get something that he just gets. He's like, well, I don't know what to say about that. Like it's hard for him to unpackage it, especially with ADHD and you don't have a very like incredibly clear, like in a very feeling oriented, like inductive thought style, and it's not linear, and you're not. It's going to be really hard to recall it to linear thinkers and teach them how to do things. Like, and he's going to think of the way they learn about things. He's going to think that's silly. He's going to be like, why do you memorize things? Why do you just know? Like, so it's a huge gulf. But even among his colleagues, which he thinks he's dumber than, well, or says that. I don't know. He's also an ENTP and sometimes not super sincere. But, they're all like, he's like, yeah, they don't get it. He's like, yeah. And his explanation was, yeah, I just, he's like, yeah, I just kind of pay attention and like create a mental map of it, of what they're saying. And like if you just think about it, like he's like, you just think about it and then you have good questions, right? Like, it's like, no, I was like, I don't think like all your colleagues are smart. Like, I don't think this is like, they're just not thinking. Like, I just don't think they turned off their brain.
Well, I guess I have that same weak spot then.
What? You think about things?
It's like all you have to do is think.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No. Yeah.
I mean, I remember I was having a conversation just a couple weeks ago, with someone whose initials are JJ, and we were talking about different graduate programs. Mm-hmm. I think it was different graduate programs. Mm-hmm. And he said something along the lines of, well, this one requires such and such scores for entry. And then I said, well, then it's very simple. The person who wants to get into that program needs to get such and such a score. Boom. Mm-hmm. And then he just kind of gave me it looks like, I don't think it works that way. It's like, well, what? If you decide you want to get some...
Yeah, right.
It's the same exact... Just think. Just do it.
Yeah, and for me, and this is something me and my dad had struggles with when I was a kid, because it's not just... He also, not only does he obviously, like, when he understands something, it's very easy for him, because he's not a conscientious, like, super conscientious person, so he's not extremely, he's not, like, as extremely, like, aware of where his student might be, and, like, he's not as paying attention to the details about the student, he's more getting enwrapped in the ideas. And for him explaining something, he just gets his brain is so lit up. I mean, you just see it, he's getting so excited. Like, when I was little, I'd be, like, asking him, he's, like, just having, like, writing a whole proof of math, like a huge proof with calculus. I'm, like, in 5th grade, and I'm not doing calculus, and it's some problem. He's like, oh, it's just one. He's like, yeah, you do all this, and you do all this, and it just comes together beautifully. And so he gets in this intellectual, like, his brain just gets lit up, and he's gone, right? Like, so when I was little, there'll be a disconnect. So, like, and since if he thinks if you conceptually understand things, you should just be able to do them. And I think that to a point. But, like, when I was 4 or 5, he asked me a question. He's like, how do I find the area under a curve? Gave me curve. He's like, how do you find the area under this? And I was like, I understood that, like, triangles were half of squares, and you could find the areas of squares. So it's pretty easy to find the area of a triangle. It's kind of a straight edge, very predictable. It's nice and, like, neat. That's how I understood. I was like, oh, it's neat and nice and, like, easy to quantify. It's like, yeah, that makes sense. And he's like, how would you? And I was like, oh, well, I was like, well, if you zoom into a curve, it flattens out. So then suddenly you have these nice little. They're really tiny, but they actually are, like, and then you multiply it or something. I was like, okay, and then you break it into tiny.
So basically, you add a whole bunch of little triangles and little rectangles together.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. That's what I said. He's like, yeah, that's it. That's wonderful. Like, great.
And that means you described something that actually converges faster than the Riemann sum.
Yeah. Yes. And he's like obviously was, very happy with me, like, thinking of that. He's like, okay, he's like, that's calculus. I was like, oh, that's pretty easy.
Conceptually,
but then he's like, yes, and then he gives me a problem set or something. I'm like, I can't do algebra. I've never done any of it. So I'm like, I don't know how this works. So I'm like, he's like, and he doesn't know. He's like, well, it makes sense to me because think about it. The fundamentals of math are just ingrained in him. He, like, can't imagine it's like not knowing how to breathe or something. And he's very far
in his field. It is like not knowing how to breathe. Like,
yeah, it is. And in his life in general, like, it would. He's like, yeah, you're not educated if you don't know calculus. That's what he considers.
That's the baseline. That's the baseline for him.
So there's that. There's years of experience being compounded with, like, sort of, like, obviously a slight detachment from the students. Like, even if it's a smart student, they're going to struggle. And
then his scores on RateMyProfessor.com are going to be abysmal.
Horrible. Oh yeah, and that's exactly.
I know, when I met him, I thought he was really cool.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think he's a cool dude. Like, honestly, he's funny, smart. Like, he's got really great, like, values and stuff. Like, he's a really good person. So, yeah, like, his Rate My Professor makes him look like a demon or something, but he's actually no. But it's just, you see this fundamental sort of difference. This all ties back to that style of thinking. Like, it's different, and there becomes a sort of while there's a large variance in gifted populations, like, they do share this, like, style of thinking in general. At least at different levels, they have predictable. So, like, that's sort of a unifying trait. So you'll see gifted people have an attraction towards each other, even if they're so different. You're like, well, why is that? It's like, well, no, because the intellectual camaraderie. And just the style of thinking. And this is something I've actually said before as well I was thinking about this was with Matt as well, small talk. I was like, well, when you talk about things, and it's like, and this is another thought I had today, actually. So this is actually ties together really nicely. essentially, I was like, there was a long stint of time where I thought I was not curious. I was just like, well, I'm obviously smart. I can learn things. Like these kids in my class who are doing good, are getting really good grades and stuff. Like it takes me like way less time to understand things than them. But they always seem like there's this population that just seems there's just so much more inquisitive than me. Like they just seem so much more like energetic, and they learn something new, and they're just so excited about. They're like, "That's so cool." I'm like, "That's not that cool. That's just normal. Like that's expected. Like that's just banal. Like that's not cool. I don't know what you're talking about." Like it's like, "Oh, I didn't know that," but like that makes sense, like complete sense, and it's not surprising at all. Like I'm really not like this is not interesting to me. I'm like, what? Am I just not curious? Like my dad's very intellectually curious, and he's doing all these things, and I was like, okay, so I miscategorized myself as like I was just like, well, I'm just kind of just not a curious person in general, but it was what it actually was, and this is my theory, is that we were just within school and with other people, we were not talking about things that would be interesting to the person in a way that would be interesting to the other person. So I'm much more interested in like in the meta, and like more fundamental approach to problem solving, like in a vacuum. I like just starting from scratch, going through tons of thought experiments, justifying each intuition, each step of the way, kind of inductive reasoning, and I love like kind of patterns that a lot, like things that combine two disparate fields in some nice way, some fundamental property or something. Like it's just so nice for me, and I love talking about it and finding these things, and like even think.
Well,
like
it allows you to do meta level thinking. It allows you to do abstraction. It allows you to
right. It allows me to abstract. It allows me to build intuition, and if it builds my intuition. Because the intuition's already there, right? But like fleshing it out, making it much more concrete and well understood. First of all, that improves you as a writer a huge amount. Like having good ideas, and then having well developed good ideas, like and just being a communicator, like it helps your understanding of it. But it's all like, I think about variance in a population. And just I'll start from something like this, and then I go to everything. Like I'm not even through I'm not even through on the gifted variance thing. I'll tie that up. But this actually segues nicely. But yeah, so like essentially what was going on was I'm not curious. It's just I had no one who was to talk about with the things that were interesting to me and that would light up my brain. I'm like, holy crap, that's so cool. To theory craft and just talk about, like, I'm like, God, that's fucking like cognitive dissonance. Like I found cognitive dissonance very interesting, but not because of the definition, but just because I applied it to like a million
because of the implications and how much it explains about the real world.
Oh yeah, and I manipulated it, and and I changed it to different situations and figured out, okay, here's like this is a short term, long term, etc. How it would affect like how people interacted with this, how pertinent it is. It's extremely pertinent, by the way. And I've written posts about it and stuff, and I have a very of anyone else in my psych class, I think I understand cognitive dissonance more than anyone else. But I just thought, with a cursory glance and kind of a just introduction in school, I'm just gonna be like, God, this shit's so boring. Like, just this definition. Like, okay, I understand that. That's pretty simple. Now, I wouldn't independently think about it further and stuff, and then when I got to doing these things, it's like, oh, so then what I was thinking about communication, like when you're talking with someone, like small talk. Then to me that was like, okay, so this explains small talk is basically, it's kind of like everyone. It's small talk can sometimes, I guess, in some people, it's not in me at all, but it can sometimes sort of create this sense of like camaraderie, right? Like it's familiarity and like everyone's communicating on this safety. Yes, everyone's communicating on this nice level of abstraction, this homogeneous level of abstraction. You're included in the conversation. Like anyone has something relevant to say in small talk. Like everyone's communicating on the same level. It's this mirroring, which is a huge thing. Mirroring. Like it's kind of things are being done. It's just this nice it's just like, but it's not, obviously nothing's being said, like nothing real is being said. And it's this nice safe zone of conversation that, and it seems
you get to feel out other people. You get to
yes.
establish these things. But if you are an intuitive person, if being intuitive is your thing, and these things such as small talk don't appeal to you, it's not necessarily because I would say that it has more to do with our own or your own or whoever's own nature. And I mean that in the way that if small talk basically has the function of allowing us to interact with somebody, well, it's like, what good does it actually do? What good does that interaction actually do? Ultimately, you can think of like, what basis for survival of our genetic material does this provide? And I would suggest that it's ultimately ability to determine friend from foe.
Yes, and this is exactly what I'm leading into. Is basically
And if you're determining friend from foe, if you're in the process of doing that, but you already have some sort of intuitive algorithm, you have some sort of a paradigm that already works for that, then why in the world would you go and expend all the effort to do something so banal as small talk when you can go and immediately jump into better things with people that you know that you're going to be able to have bigger and better conversations with?
Right. So yeah, like it's a night, like small talk's this like starting point, and when people are engaged, and then once it gets like, the thing is, small talk, like, it's not just how's the weather. It becomes like, like, what do you like? For some
what brought
people,
you here today?
Yeah, for some people, the conversations they have with other people that, like, maybe me and you think, oh, that's just small talk. Like, that's just talk. That's actually just talk. They might, they're talking about the big sports game and what this person did, and it's just stuff that, like, it's interesting to them. It actually, like, there are people who are interested in these things, and it's like this safety. And so conversation, when you're interested, when you're involved in the conversation, it's fun. Like, it's great, especially there's a lot. I think a majority of people are extroverted, but I don't know. I don't think it's a like. I think it's pretty close. Like, maybe like 48-52 or something like that, or 52-48, whatever. But like, but in general, people like socializing. Obviously, socializing is extremely integral to like, we're a very social species. We're not tigers or something. So like, kind of starting out at this nice base level, then and then progressing the talk in a nice, in a nice fashion until they're at that level of conversation that that they're happy with, and then when they have conversations with their friends, when they have conversation with their family, with their spouses, etc. Like, this is the level of conversation they'll be having, the things they'll be talking about, the way they'll be talking about it. And the more similarity in this method between the two parties, the closer the connection between them, or the easier it is for them to get along. And it's like, oh, well, it's just, he's thinking about it just like me. So what I found is, with like very like what you'll see is the content of the conversation doesn't matter at all. So like, what I'll sometimes think, what I thought about is, I was like, well, if I talk, for example, if I was talking about like patterns in music or something like that, like, might not necessarily be incredibly interested in this by itself, right? Like, in this random thing I'm talking about, it might seem esoteric to some people, but in the process of unraveling it, the thought process behind going between the meta things, and the way I think about it, and the way I'm talking about it with someone, like, so for example, you, Matt, like, that's a really good process for me, and they extremely, extremely fun. And even if it's a concept, something that I haven't had much interest in, like, it's like, oh, well, I don't care much about this subject or something, but then, explaining how it interacts with everything, and the way, the layers to it, and the layers of abstraction, and all these, going basically understanding it through and through, and then connecting it to everything else. It's a very wonderful process, and can make kind of boring subjects like really interesting, just by seeing it in this light, and then having someone to. So like, this level, people have their comfortable level of conversation, and for us, it's just what my conversations with you are obviously just so, like, I'm thinking about them, and like, I sometimes think about them in comparison to the conversations I'll have with like certain friends every day, and I'm like, gosh, like, these are these are people I know in real life and have known for a longer time than you, but our conversations are just like not even close. Like, there's just no candle, right? And so it's kind of like small talk is kind of this precursor method into finding that level of communication, right? Like, and obviously talking about variant, like bringing this back into our, this idea of variance, like more we're searching out our group. We kind of strive for homogeneity in our social circles. We want people with similar views, similar styles of thought,
Well, it's
similar
safety.
back. It's just
Safety.
yes,
Again.
safety.
It's
Yes,
like
exactly.
if you don't know what to expect out of somebody, if there aren't any particular well, we can go and say if you don't understand the moral structure or the value structure of a person, if you don't understand what makes them tick, if you don't understand, then how in the world do you know if you're going to die in your sleep?
Right,
Well,
exactly.
that winds up. I know this sounds really, really morbid, but in many situations, uh, and in modern society, it doesn't wind up being necessarily that. But genetic death is the same as death to us. So
Mm-hmm.
if you find people that are going to, if there isn't that connect, you're not going to be operating on the same wavelength. You're not going to be, making babies or whatever, and your genetic material
Right.
doesn't like that. Additionally,
Mm-hmm.
additionally, this whole idea of dying in your sleep isn't necessarily an unreasonable one. And I'll say that's actually something I've had with people, or at least something that's kind of given me pause with people who are very expressive, responsive in an emotional sense. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
in that, uh, well, I think that we've talked about. Um,
Oh, did you cut out or did I cut
I
out?
think
What
that
happened?
was you, but I'm not sure. It may have been me. Uh, are you there?
Yep, I'm there. I think we just had a big hiccup or something.
Yeah, I think it was. I think it was probably a Discord thing. I'll see if it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it was on my side or yours or whatever. But
It seemed to be just a spike though, but yeah.
yeah, okay.
But yeah, keep going. Keep
So
going.
so I was thinking that. Oh boy, I lost track of what the conversation was now.
Well, you had like the dying and the sleep thing
Oh
and the
yeah,
trusting.
oh yeah, and
That's
and
sort of
and then ultimately, so I was helping out on a friend's farm this past month, which is something I haven't done for a while. I mean, the
oh
last time I've done farm work and stuff like that was in 2016, and I was dealing with somebody who was a very interesting piece of work. With regard to his abilities, he really had trouble with counting, and he was essentially illiterate, and it was very difficult. He loved music. He was very emotional, but then you would find that he would get um, quite easily perturbed or agitated or even we'll just say completely infuriated and pushed over the edge by things that weren't really life or death situations. So let's say you're sorting potatoes from rocks on top of a on top of a potato digging machine, and let's say you're going through a particularly rocky patch, and then you wind up having the flow rate of potatoes plus rocks being a bit unmanageable. You can slow down the machine, you can slow down the conveyor, and you can and it's literally a question of push this button, move the rocks, push the button to start the conveyor again. Problem solved. But for him, the natural reaction is to throw a gigantic cursing fit and then start throwing potatoes and rocks in every which direction haphazardly.
right. That's dangerous. And yeah, and he's
It's
a
like I
large
don't
guy,
think.
by the way.
Yes, this dude was pretty close to 2 meters tall, uh, well over 100 kilograms. So big guy. And it was one of those things that you never quite knew what was going to set him off. It's like if you're talking about people that might, get arrested for a crime, he would be one of the people that would probably commit crimes out of passion or rage or something like that, as opposed to, a premeditated crime. He could just, lose his ability to control himself and, kill someone that would make him angry without even thinking, just perhaps, seeing red and then just...
Yeah.
And
right, and you're not gonna
and so on, and you're not going to be able to reason him out of it. You're not going to be able to do that, and therefore, someone that has qualms about hurting somebody else in self-defense. I mean, I absolutely hate hurting people, and if I wind up getting into, if someone picks a fight with me, I try to avoid it more than anything else.
Well, and I can even. I can tie this even more into sort of basically I can elaborate more into this.
Please do.
So because I want to clear up the steps. So because it's you say, and I'm like, oh yeah, that of course. But it might, I want maybe even clear it up even more. So when you say, for example, life and death, that it's and people might be like, what? We're talking about small talk. You just it's life or what? You die in your sleep. That might seem like some, and your example makes sense, but even more, if we're thinking about the intuition that people are using, it's your ability. We want the ability. So humans and just people, it's just nice for us in general. We want control and power. We want to be able to control our environment. We want our environment to be to do things we expect it to do. We want things to be predictable, because being able to move around, swiftly and unimpeded in your environment is just good. It's it's easy to do things. More freedom, etc. Just
and freedom requires a certain amount of order.
Yes, and exactly, and so what we find is when someone's pretty much the same as you in intelligence or similar, you can communicate to them. And they can communicate back to you, and it's this two-way street. It's predictability right there. It's, if I tell this guy, this guy's like me, we had a similar upbringing. He has the same values as me. I can trust him to not do something that I would just be that's immoral. We grew up in the same town. We have stuff to talk about, a bunch of shared experiences. Let's say we're the same intelligence. It's just we're very similar to each other. I'm it's just a clone. We're just copies. Just we have some other traits that are more unimportant. We have different hair color, stuff like that. But fundamentally, we work in very similar ways. So when we see each other, we see, it's just like another me. We get along. It's predictable. I know what this person's going to do. They're going to have my best intentions in mind because they're very similar. And we can work together, and we can work towards a common goal because there's a good chance we have it, because we're just very similar. And it's predictable, and it's nice, and it's just really good. It's working in a group. It's great for humans, right? But when we talk to that person who, oh shit, I don't understand him, for example, the guy you're talking about, that's scary, unpredictable, non-understanding. And there's we can look at a very cogent, logical reasoning, because it's interesting, using logic, because emotions play a huge part in this, and just instincts. So it's nice to get it's funny the situation, because the same emotional will arise from two different situations, but one will be so logically obvious, and the other, it's the same emotion and for the same basic reason, but you're that doesn't make sense. So, for example, let's say I talk to, I'm a random person coming up, and you get into one of Matt and I's conversation, and say this person's just an average student at school, not interested in any of this stuff. This is not their cup of tea. They're what the fuck are these guys saying? Why? It doesn't make sense. There'll be a negative reaction and a negative emotional reaction to things you don't get, in a group of people talking about things you don't get. That feels like exclusion, right? And when someone's doing things you don't understand, and you can't predict them, and there's no longer this sense of control and this nice sense of reflection, it feels dangerous. You're God. Well, first of all, it feels depending on the situation, it can feel bad. You can get a little mad. You're like, what? And you'll see people get mad, like at people for just being like smarter than them. That's like something that does happen. And it's like, why though? Because when we look at this 300-pound guy who's 6'6", like huge, it's easy to see the threat he poses to us, and it's a situation where our instincts and logic conveniently like align quite nicely.
Mm-hmm.
But if someone's like, if there's some nerd who's making you feel mad in class because he does better on tests or something, it's the same. It's that like monkey brain, like there's danger. You don't know why they're doing these things. Like they're not acting like you.
It's fear of the unknown.
Danger, danger. They're not you. They're not acting like you. You don't know what's going to happen. It's dangerous. So yeah. So it's just fear, as you said, just fear of the unknown. And so it doesn't need a logical. It's just unknown. That's enough for you to evoke this response. It doesn't need some logical. Oh, he's 300 pounds and huge. That's scary. Like no.
Yeah.
No, it's simply unknown. Like our instincts are very tempered.
That's the same reason that I have pause. I definitely have pause when interacting with people who are emotionally expressive, responsive. It's not that there's necessarily anything wrong with being expressive, responsive, but it's like I'm normally in problem-solving mode. That's my natural natural way of being. Is I'm looking at things, trying to systematize things, trying to make life in that particular sense better for me and the people around me, doing what I can in order to improve systems, improve the world. That's kind of what I feel my role is in society. And then when dealing with someone who's very expressive, responsive in an emotional sense, then somehow, in order to keep things on track, in order to keep things going in the same direction, part of what winds up having to get added to the system, and it changes. It's variable, is state control, emotional control, figuring out how to make sure that the people there don't fly off the handle over the most stupid, asinine, crazy things. And so it's difficult for me because I'm always in that problem-solving mode. It's very, very difficult or nearly always in that mode. I'm always trying to filter information, figure out its significance, categorize it, or rather, I am categorizing and trying to see the implications or whatever.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, somebody comes out of left field and is angry or sad or about ready to kill someone or whatever it may be. And then it's like, okay, well, I have to take a break from my thinking in order to deal with the emotional state of this person and to hopefully channel it into something more productive. This is like that's the best case scenario. The scenario where you can control the situation and you don't have to worry about whether or not that person has a knife that's going in between your ribs.
Right.
But even so, it winds up being deleterious to at least my plans, and maybe I'm just this impatient person that can't stand even the teeniest little inefficiency in plans, and maybe I should lower my standards and become more patient and all the rest of that. But yeah, I don't like there is a logical reason for me kind of having pause with people that are emotional that are emotionally unstable, but it seems like many people that it just doesn't faze many people at all. In fact, some people might go and find emotionally unstable people as interesting or exciting or as
deep.
Yes. Exactly.
God.
Oh, there must be. Yes. Like people can go and actually mistake being emotionally unstable and volatile for being very passionate and so on. Those are actually very easy to mistake for one another if you're not deliberately looking for that.
Yeah, exactly. And I have this interesting friend group in college. So my best friend from college, he's an INTP, HG guy, definitely. Pretty poor central nervous coherency. pretty bad, like Dunning-Kruger stuff. Like thinking, you know, at first, actually, I improved him. He's like much more confident now, like back to normal sort of thing. But and then the other people in the group, one was that guy's friend who was from his hometown, who's a complete, his personality type's an ESFP. And he's just this like entertainer guy, like big bundle of joy. And then, and like, you know, he sees himself as like an anti-intellectual, right? And he's actually smart. Like he got a 32 on his ACT. So 98th percentile, and he acts like the most anti-intellectual person you could ever meet. Like but I mean, it makes sense. He's an ESFP. Like it's not the thinking type. It doesn't matter. Like so, it's interesting. This group, like we all get along. But obviously, I get along much better. I just get along better, not because like I will say my friend who's HG. Personality wise and like as a person, like he's like not like he's like probably a little bit less reliable than them. He's kind of probably less like sympathetic, and you know like you know a little bit more cunning and conniving. So you know like that sort of thing that you might be like, oh, these are bad. Like these are things you don't like. I get along with him so much better, right? Like and like and it's just easier for us to get along.
Yeah. And I don't even have a problem getting along with psychopaths. Psychopaths are cool. I like them.
Right.
Yeah. Very predictable, very safe. It's
right.
It's like you don't have to.
And yeah, and this guy, he's like.
They don't trigger the unknown threat response.
Right. Well, yeah, because so. And so our group's close, right? Like we'll be insulting each other and stuff. Like it's just like very like kind of like a brotherly like you know close thing. And we've had a lot of shared experiences, right? Like we shared freshman year. They lived 2 doors down. I was always in their room. We were doing stuff together as a group. But there's these two like I just naturally am much more drawn to this one guy in the group because we can because he's quite smart. And the other when I'm interacting one-on-one with the other people, like we don't know there's a communication barrier between us. And now while we have similar interests, like stuff like as far as like basic interests and similar like upbringings, that's all quite similar, like high school experiences, etc. Like when I'm with them, like it's like I sense more like I'm like they just like we don't get each other. Like I just get that feeling, you know, and like I'm like we would never talk about the same things. Like there's like we're friends mostly in like shared experiences. Like that's like I would probably not be talking to these and hanging out with these people had it not been circumstance, right? And it's fundamental. Like I'll see, and this happens more one way than the other. Since I'm the full myself thinker who thinks he can like understand why things are happening, but I do actually have a pretty good idea. And they'll get like mad at me at certain times. I've noticed this. Like, it'll just be how it's not like mad, but it'll be like it'll be like surprised at how I reacted to something. This is also a feeler versus thinker golf, compounded into like an intellectual difference as well. So, and this happens the most between my best friend and then his friend from home. The INTP and the ESFP. Like they have the biggest just friction between them, and they're very they like each other a lot, and they're very nice to each other, and there's no bad feelings ever. But there's still a lot of like random friction, just because they're just so fundamentally different in the way they think about things, and you get mad, like for example, one of the feelers got mad at it. We had indulged in kind of drinking and smoking at like a party or something, right? Like where there was a small get together at my house, and if anyone knows anything about getting crossed, it's it's when you get high and you get drunk, and it's just who knows what happens. For me, if I get crossed, I throw up. I get dizzy. It doesn't work for me. But like I'm also someone who learns the hard way everything. So of course I had to I've done it, of course, and of course I've done it more than once, and of course I've only decided now after a few trials, like, yeah, it doesn't really matter. I kind of just throw up. It's just not good, not worth I was like, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore. Like, you know, and maybe the smart person's like, hey, or maybe not smart, but sensible person, like sensible, it's like, hey, you know, that's, you know, weed by itself has an effect on you, and then alcohol, they're both pretty strong effects, and then you combine them. Like that's not, I'm just not going to do that. That's not sensible, and yeah, that's like a bad idea. Like no, like I'll just try and fail. Like I'm not someone who I'm extremely impulsive. I mean, on my I was looking at my psychological evaluation when I was little, and they're like just extremely high on the impulsivity scale, like very I think the second percentile or something. So which in a bad sense, like you're way too impulsive. But so I just do things, and then I figure out and I learn, and then I do reflect. I was like, oh, okay, well, you know, this made me feel bad, etc. Or like I learned from these experiences, but I learned the hard way a lot. Like I do poorly in school, then I do better, and oh shit, like I screw up a lot, and then suddenly, you know, I do horribly on the first test, and then I'm doing really well everywhere. Like I'm just someone who learns like quite naturally that way, and because I'm an impulsive person who doesn't like is also like not risk averse. So, and I'm also a scientific person who loves to experiment as well. So it's just that combination of like I'll be my own experiment and just that doesn't work, and it's a very natural process. I've been this way since I was a kid, and it's just the way I, you know. Obviously, there's some sense. I'm not just like, okay, let's go work in some heavy machinery and you know, that's shouting back to a Darwin Award, but like calculated risks, and I can fail, and I fail a lot, but never in the sense that it's like, oh God, well your life's ended, or like you've actually messed up really badly. More like, oh well, that's going to be inconvenient, or oh that's kind of annoying, or oh that's a little painful, but I learned that way, and it's just very natural. So, for example, people were smoking and drinking, right? This person he's never smoked, but he's drank a lot, and then he had already drank that night, which was sort of surprising. I was like, why are you drinking? And so he was like, you know, five shots in or something, like pretty tipsy, but he's kind of not a lightweight, so that's, you know, not like super tipsy or anything, but drunk, definitely drunk, and. You know, then he's like just smoking, right? And he's like not smoked much, like very few times before. Like he's smoking quite a significant amount. Like he's handling it pretty well. Like he's not like bitching out. And he's coughing and taking. He's like, my mom ain't raised no bitch. I was like, all right. And so it like this is like I know what's happening. Like I know what's gonna happen. Like it's obvious, right? But I'm not the type of person to give advice because I'm like, you're just going to learn. Like, that's just how it is. Like, I'm not going to tell you what to do because I never fucking listen to anyone when they tell me shit. So it was, obviously this is extreme. That's very hyperbole, but like, I was just like, whatever. If I tell you something, like, regardless of if I tell you or not, you know? And so best just leave it be. Like, let them, so of course he gets sick, right? Really sick because he just smokes so much and drinks so much, and then he's just like, it makes you really dizzy. Like, it's just a really bad combo. And some people are fine. Like, some people don't get that sick. Like, alcohol makes me throw up a lot, for example. Like, I have a weak stomach to alcohol. I don't like alcohol that much. Weed by itself, I've never thrown up. There's some people who, like, throw up from weed. There's some people who don't throw up from alcohol and throw up from weed. It's like a weird mystery box of how someone's going to react to these things that I found. And getting crossed is getting crossfaded. Some people can handle it perfectly and have no problems. Me, I just will throw up. It just will happen. It doesn't matter how much I do. It happens. So I was like, okay, well, after doing it like 3 times, I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to do that anymore. It's sort of been 3 for 3. But I'm letting him try. Like, I'm like, okay, like there was people told him, like, he was warned, right? He was warned that, this might happen. It's very likely to happen. Like, and I give people a lot of, for example, I give them a lot of, like, I want them to have freedom to make their decisions. I think the best person to make decisions for themselves, ideally, is themselves. So I'm not going to give a bunch of unadulterated advice and, this, that, be careful. Like, no, like, think and do, and you know, it'll be fine, probably. Like, as long as it'll just work out probably if you just think a little bit at least and then do it and do some analysis of the risk, right? Like, is it worth it? For me, I'm not even considering, like, I don't care if I throw up one time, like, that's no big deal. Like, I just want to see. I don't even consider that risk because intuitively I already have a feeling of, I don't give a shit. Like I'm not I'm not going to die. I'm not going to go through excruciating pain. Cool. Let's see what happens. But some people are very like this. For example, this feeler felt sort of betrayed. Like we did not like he was just throwing up for like over an hour, right? Like he was having a horrible time. I was just cracking up, right? I'm like, this is hilarious. Like of course it happens. Like this was very predicted. It's funny. Like it's funny to like see it. It happened to me before. It's funny to see it happen to someone else. The learning process, right? It's a beautiful thing. And I'm like he knows how to throw up in a toilet, and like he's been sick before. Like I'm not gonna go pamper him and you want some water. Like I'm not like he's not my girlfriend.
No, that's the ISFJ's job.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, okay, so there's two feelers in the group and two thinkers, right? And just two thinkers, me and him were just on the couch, just like doing random shit. I don't even remember, like talking about something or. Like I think I was showing him StarCraft. I didn't think he wanted to see. Like he was not interested by StarCraft. He's like, no, why? I was like, I like this a lot. So I'm like watching a replay on StarCraft or a pro play. I'm like, hey, look, this is really cool. He's like, I'm enjoying it by myself. I'm just enjoying myself, right? Like I'm being very anti-feeler here, like, but I'm with my friends, so it's like it's fine, right? But the other one apparently, but he doesn't say like he didn't say this to me. He's not super assertive, but he had a really bad time, apparently, the one who threw up and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like he's like, oh, this just, and I like feels like kind of like betrayed by me, and because I didn't help him or anything, I didn't do anything like it was at my place, right? I wasn't very sympathetic or anything like that sort of. They like the feelers react. They're like, God, they feel kind of this abandonment, right? And that this is something that I've seen just in feelers in general, specifically. It's like are betrayed, and then they might hold a little grudge against you and stuff like that. Like because they were emotionally
because you weren't. Yes, because of the emotional aspect of it, as opposed to the fact that you know someone's going to get better, so that means that you don't need them to, or that they don't necessarily need you to hold their hand from a physical perspective.
Right. And I hate when people patronize me. I hate it. Like
I mean, I'll admit, like if I'm really really sick, I like it if somebody gets me a cup of broth or something like that. But
of course, but you don't expect, if you're throwing up in a trash can, you don't expect your college friend to hold my hair or something. Like you don't expect that, right? And that's why I said I'm not your girlfriend. Like if it's a girl, like yes, it's someone you have an emotional investment in, and a very like romantic one. You need to be, you should care for your this person, and maybe if it's your kid or something like. But like, if I was throwing up a lot because I threw up and because I drank a lot and I came home, my dad would never give me sympathy for that. He'd be like, now if it's a little kid, now there's a difference. If it's a really little kid who unfortunately got a hold of alcohol, then you help them, right? But we're adults, right? So I'm just seeing someone mess up and oh shit, it happened to them. They learned the hard way. Like that's funny, and I'm like that just happens. I have no sympathy because it's not like there's nothing to feel bad for or. There's nothing to pity them. That they're learning, just like and they're just learning in a kind of like comedic way because something kind of bad happens to them, and it's funny when the person falls down. Obviously, that if they get really hurt, it's not funny, but it's funny when
but if you have somebody that decides, hey, it's going to be fun to get a running start and try to jump through a doorway, and they go and they hit their head on the door frame.
I've seen that video. Yeah, I saw a video where someone just. I think it was intentional, just trying to hit their head. Yeah, so it's like, come on, yeah. So there's stuff like that, but like in general, it's like okay, like it's a learning process. It's kind of funny, happens to everyone, and it's just it's a reminder. Like you're a human too. Like hey, we all make mistakes, and mistakes are funny, right? Because when you look back on them, it's like, well, I know now. Like it's kind of like dramatic irony in a book, right? Like I know this guy's gonna die, like in a book, obviously not in real life. And the characters don't, so it's kind of like, oh, I know something else, and things can be funny when you see something happening. You're like, oh boy, it's kind of like when it's funny, it's fun, and this is a dynamic very essential to people, like people in the know and people like ignorant people versus informed people. Like informed people, sort of like it's like a sense of. like if 4 people in any sense kind of have a role, like to be there as kind of an like informed people have kind of, I guess, the role of sort of to be there, just oversee things. You're kind of like the dominant in the situation, right? Like someone, and you're someone with like, it's like a sense of power. If you know something and someone else doesn't, it's kind of like a little sense of power. And then the way that, when it's translated through emotions and shit, like basically the way it manifests in these social situations where someone does something stupid and it's funny and they screw up, it's humor, right? It's fun. Like, it's funny that someone didn't know something, and it's like it's a very weird. It's like I think it just goes. It basically, it all roots back to like power and stuff like that. Like when someone messes up and you don't, it's like you being better than them. Like I think that's the root, is the competitiveness and the like. Okay, well, I'm a better survivor. Like it helps. Other people doing worse does look like you doing better. Like in the monkey brain, it's like okay, but when it's in this social situation and all of these kind of primal feelings have been diluted through a lot of emotion. It's funny. Like that's what it turns into. It's just funny. So maybe at the root, it's like, oh, well, I'm better than that person, and
it's laughing in terms of relief.
Yeah.
It's laughing because because you have more serotonin now.
Right. Exactly. And
I mean, why do you think that the best comedians engage in self-deprecating humor?
Right.
It's like you literally get in front of people and make them feel safe because they can go and laugh at and they can go and laugh at your inadequacies or my inadequacies or whoever's there on stage.
Right. People love, exactly. So, and that's what it is.
I mean, that's why like these psychology books go and cite this idea that if you are really on top of things, if you're highly qualified, if you're highly competent, if you're all these other things, that one of the best things you can do when meeting people is meet them in an office full of all of your certificates and spill your coffee.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it makes them feel safe.
Spill your coffee, drop your pen, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And now you actually have a whole bunch of people that are really, really well put together, pretending to not be as well put together in order to be more relatable.
Right, exactly. And it manifests. So... but it manifests as humor, basically, right? Like, it is a primal urge, and it actually is it's like, oh, humans are cold. Like, they're laughing at other people's demise. But it's not actually me, like, oh, I'm so happy I'm more competent than my friend. I know how to not do that. Like, that's not what it is. It's just, it makes people feel good because it is this, the serotonin thing and the relief and that. But it in a social situation, it just precipitates as humor. And it's fun. Like, people laughing is fun. It's a nice time, basically. So someone else is failing. The monkey brain's in the back, kind of saying stuff, but it manifests. The monkey brain gets translated a bunch until it's just an enjoyable situation, and it's not like god.
Yeah, monkey brain goes into
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so it's just funny. So it was funny. Like I wasn't sympathetic at all. No, I wasn't empathetic. When I remember, and because I've been in the same situation before, and I've even been, laughing at myself in the situation. I'm like, God,
and you're not expecting any sympathy from anybody else if you get yourself in this situation.
No, hell no.
It's not like you're going and holding this absurd set of double standards on everybody else.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, there are lots of people that do that and that do expect it out of others.
Yes, and that was very foreign to me, and I was like, okay, like that's how you think about things. Like, okay. See, and this was like word of mouth, right? It came to me, like, he had said to the other feeler in the group that, complain about it, right, to the feeler, but and then the other feeler says it to what's funny is he'll try to get he's like, he's like, you know what Matt said? Like, it's kind of like that thing, like, you know what, this person's not, it's actually a different Matt. He had the same name, but, he's like, you know what, this person said, and he's like, they said this. That's it. Like, he's like, oh, he was unhappy at this. But it's kind of like, but it's like bribery for other feelers, right? It's like, oh, well, this person was at your place and they were unhappy, and they didn't have a good time that night, and they felt like, you didn't you weren't paying enough attention to them at all. I was like,
yeah, and in a sense,
that's not gonna make me feel bad though. I'm gonna be like, okay, that's how I am.
But there could also be a method of virtue signaling to oneself.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It is virtue signaling.
Were I in this position, I would have done that. You didn't. Therefore, I'm somehow morally superior to you.
Yes. Yeah. So this person does virtue signaling a lot, and subconsciously too. It's like not like I see his monkey brain. His monkey brain's like on his, it's like on his shoulder. Like I see everything it's doing. Like feelers are very. That's the thing. Is that it's not
very transparent.
Emotions confusing. Very transparent. And you can just figure out why they did anything. And then they think you're a guru because you understand emotions, but you're not like bound by them because you're a thinker. And they just think they're like, oh my god, like I've had them. They're like, how do you understand it so much? They're like, it doesn't make like because it's simple.
It's probably because your window of things that you find tolerable is much wider. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not going to say that we're not somehow subject to emotions. I know that if I do get pushed past that point.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's not fun. You don't want to see a thinker because it means it's bad. It's a bad.
If you see a thinker get emotional, woo!
If you see the borderline personality disorder person get freak out over a relationship, it doesn't carry as much weight as the stoic doctor freaking out over something like it because it's not their prime. For one, it's. For one side, it's kind of a primary modality of communication. They're like, yeah, I use emotions and I emotionally vent and I have outbursts and it's how it's just how I am. While for the thinker, it's just foreign and it means they've been pushed really far to actually get to that point, and it's not something that they should be doing. And that's So emotionally, it's very. Interesting. And this person does the monkey brain all the time. For example, this is an example from yesterday. I can pull right to my head of their monkey brain. Just, for example, my friend, I couldn't go on last night because I was hungover because I had partied basically. And I didn't smoke or anything, but I just drank and I threw up. My other friend, the other thinker, actually went to the hospital and had a saline solution. And the thing was, he was not like, he didn't need his stomach pumped or anything. But he was they're like, and he could have not gone to the hospital. Like he would have survived, right? But like, it was just the people there like, hey, like he's not being very responsive. And it's, it's like a pre-med group of people. At least that's how everyone met. So everyone sort of does that, right? And it was fine. Like, he was fine. He he had no like brain damage. Like, well, of course you have a little brain damage, I think, just because you forget stuff. But like, he was completely coherent. Like there was no like organ. Like he was far off from actually being damaged, but he was still like out of it drunk, right? And this is the first time that's ever happened to him. And for neither of us were like worried about it. Like him neither. Like once he woke up, he's like, "Oh shit," Like, and he was not like, "Oh God," like he didn't look back in the past and it was not like, "Oh God, I almost died." Like I'm freaking out.
Yes.
Like no, he's like, "Oh God, that was stupid. I won't do that again." Like, and he's like, "God, weed is just so much better than alcohol." That's like that's
the conclusion of the experience.
It's like, God, yeah, like this is I know I have hospital bills, but he was given a huge like honors land grant. I don't know. He got some scholarship some grant for the university, and then they just gave him a check in the mail that was like, he's like, I don't think I'm supposed to have this, but I'm not going to tell them. He's like, this doesn't add up. Like, I don't have this much scholarship or anything. Like, I'm not supposed to. So the hospital visit, he's going to be able to pay for it. Like, he's like, the school gave him a lot of money randomly. But he's like, but it's inconvenient.
But he still winds up having that bill that he could have easily avoided,
and it's stupid.
But it was a learning opportunity,
like a learning experience, right? And the feelers treat it very. So, for example, that happened, and I was at my friend's house. My friend who I live with had left the party, and he goes back, and I'm there. Like I remember just breathing deeply on a bed for a long time, just trying to I guess because I was like nauseous, right? Like you're just nauseous, you like just feel sick. You're like, oh, I don't want to throw up, but like I will eventually throw up. And I don't know. Then I fell asleep, and then I woke up, and I had to wait before I had to come to my apartment because I was like, okay, I'm not going to bring my keys because I'm with my friend. He is better about keeping track of stuff. I'm not going to just lose my shit I was like, okay, it makes sense, and we'll stick together. We didn't stick together, so I ended up having to wait at my friend, one of the feelers' apartments, the ESFP, and so we're just sitting there talking. He's playing Call of Duty, and I had texted my friend to come pick me up, and he'd answered the Snapchat. Like I Snapchatted him, and he's like, yeah. He's like, when do you want me to come pick you up? And I was like, oh, I just said I was like ASAP if possible, but I wasn't I was just like come as soon as you can, basically. I'm not waiting for anything over here. There's no perfect time. Just come when you can. But I wasn't rushed. I didn't have a rush, and he didn't open my Snapchat. And I figured out why. I was like, oh, Harris is not responding to my Snapchat. It had been 30, 40 minutes. I was like, oh, he probably just fell asleep. I'm sure he had just woken up, saw this notification, responded to it, rolled over, and fell back asleep. And is what happened. I was like, oh, he's not responding. And then what the feeler says, he's like, oh, he always responds quickly when I message him. And it's like, I was like, what? I don't think it's a me versus you thing in this circumstance. I think it's circumstantially he's not responding, and that was the case. He hadn't, he woke up briefly and then responded and then fell back asleep. That's why he wasn't responding to me, not because he doesn't like the feeler thing is to I don't know. It was interesting. It was the monkey brain.
Exactly. It's constantly
The monkey brain status. Oh, he doesn't do that to me. Oh, this person respects me more. I have more. It translates to more power, right? It's just trying to get the leg up a little bit.
Yeah, and it's almost subconscious, or at least it's ingrained.
It was so subconscious.
It's not like they're going out of their way to go do that. It's just a part of their existence.
Right. It's not something I would ever say. If my friend who went.
And now you're not virtue signaling at all.
True.
But it's not something I would say either. It's not something I would say either, though. That's that's more of a function.
I'm not going to call it right. It's just a function of how we think, how we function.
Yeah, and our status symbols, so to speak, are probably different. I don't know if.
Yeah. Definitely.
For instance, rapidity of a response to a text message from me says absolutely nothing about what I think about you.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. No, me too. And that for me. Okay, so in my first relationship, and I figured this out, after the relationship, right? But the person had they're definitely borderline. It's that they definitely are, because and I'm going to qualify already, and it's going to sound like I'm defensive or something, but it's just because. It's just because there's this advice, right? That they're like, oh, girls are just emotional, right? And it's true, and people are emotional, and I've dealt with emotional people before. But this person had pattern emotional reactions to specific circumstances that was not healthy, and it was not within the realm of normal. And I was like, what's going on? I knew something was wrong, I just didn't know what, and that took me a little bit of research, not actually looking for the problem, but I just stumbled upon I was just doing. Interesting. I was really into psych at the time, so I was just reading about it. And I was like, "Oh, this is them. This is textbook." The example the DSM used was a situation that had happened in my life, exactly, word for word. I was like, "Oh, makes sense." And then they hit all the criteria, all the early childhood stuff. So, it was something. So when you're going. So for example, when you're going to a relationship, it's especially. So this is me. This is with my ex was a moderately to high, I guess low. I don't know. I'm just moderately gifted. Borderline I don't know if it's an I or E. It's an NFP, I think. Mm-hmm. No, or J. I don't know. It's an NF. It's actually hard to tell with the extrovert or introvert thing, but. It might be an INFJ, it might be an INFP or something like that. It's one of these. So it's just very emotional, extremely emotional. And one thing I was interested in at the time, I was like, wow, I've never
easily makes friends or not?
I think easily makes friends. Well, no. Kind of. I think she might be introverted.
All right. So So
it's not strong either way.
Okay.
It's just not strong either way. I like, regardless of which one it is, it's not like a very extreme.
Mm-hmm. And probably then an FP.
Yeah.
One or the other.
Yeah. 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 It's. I don't know. It's hard for me because she's very organized and conscientious, but like, I don't know, like, value wise, like what, like, is that just because that's just how she functions and she's just conscientious, or is it's because fundamentally, like, she's driven to like, is it the J drive, or is it just, being a conscientious, girl? It's harder for me to tell. Like, it's harder for me to type girls generally, but just because I can't reflect on my own experience and etc. But like, so that's sort of the signaling that the Fs get was sort of just like, this is my first real encounter, like sort of reading into a situation, and it's the thing is, the monkey brain talks first. It's the person rationalizes it later. So her monkey brain would go off at a time where Lily actually, like, suddenly the monkey brain, like, suddenly in a negative mood, is sort of mad at me, right? This happened like twice. This is like, I was like, what the hell, though? Like, we were just enjoying ourselves, right? Like, I had actually done nothing. Like, there was no area for me to screw up. It was some feeling, a feeling of abandonment just appears, right? And so she's having some negative, like, distortion. And just, like, suddenly it's unhappy with me and, like, pushing me away. And so I was like, wait, I was like, what is going on? Like, I don't get it. Like, I'm very confused. Like, because I'm very, like, if I screw up, I usually can tell. Like, I usually have some sense.
And you're trying to figure out what the situation is.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And then it's like, so then afterwards she apologized. She's like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, I was like, okay, so I didn't actually do anything wrong. But I actually still don't understand. Like, that's not something that would ever happen to me. And just like the status monkey thing, like when my friend said, oh, he always Snapchats me back. Like, I would never say something like that to someone. Because if I said that to someone, if I said that, because I'm
it would show some horrible lack of analysis of the situation at bare minimum.
And first of all, emotionally, I would never, like, want to do that. Like, even if I'm a thinker, I'm actually really empathetic. Like, I don't want to make someone feel worse. Like, oh, hey, this person doesn't message you back. Like, they don't care about you as much as me. Like, I would never, like, imply that to someone. I would feel so guilty. I can't even insult someone, and, like, of course. I mean,
banter, like what you and I do sometimes. Yes, I mean, or you and a friend, that's completely different.
Like, we can banter talk about the guy. We can talk about the guy who can't really read and is kind of dangerous, and we can kind of make fun of that.
But it's not in any kind of a nasty way, and we don't.
Not nasty. And I'm not going to go to your face and be like, you idiot. Like, I'm not going to. That's awful. Like, this is being a bad person.
No, you don't. You don't do things in a derogatory sense. You give people respect, but still, you somehow at least attempt to. If there's something to be gained from discussing a situation, you discuss it in as constructive of a way as possible. Like, the only reason I brought this guy up was because it was a good example of thinking, like, literally somebody who goes and throws rocks and potatoes at what amounts to a minor inconvenience in the whole scheme of things.
Right.
Something that will be over in 20 or 30 seconds.
And then when we talk about it, it's kind of funny, right? It's like, I think it is a little bit of monkey brain, but but we're not like. There's no malice. There's no ill intent towards these people, right?
No. It's mostly just trying to figure out what's the best way of dealing with the situation.
And that is these sorts of situations. Like, for example, us, a feeler might look. It's like, oh wow, look at these two, like, extremely high IQ thinkers who have lots of advantages. Like, kind of making fun. Like, they'd be like, oh. Well, look, I'm talking about that guy like they're so high and mighty or something. Like, that's the feeler's take on it. But, like, the thinkers are just like, it's interesting. First of all, that guy he's an outlier. He's like you're not going to see many people like him. It's very interesting to see about what he does. It's funny. It's and it's not like he's, like, getting hurt, or anything. But he's not like, oh, my feelings are hurt. Matt, I was listening to tuning into Calling Sacred Cows, and Matt, I heard him talking bad about.
But even if he was tuning in, I mean, he and I had a conversation about it afterward, at least in as much as was absolutely possible, and the conclusion was, well, he I'm trying to think of. I think it was number one. He hadn't had breakfast that morning, and he wasn't used to like intermittent fasting or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Right.
No. I mean, like he was. I think he had a certain expectation of what was going to happen, and he just got completely thrown out of his comfort zone by the whole thing.
Right. Exactly.
Now, granted, the fact that he was almost incidentally, I would guess, throwing rocks at me.
Mm-hmm.
And he was this really, really big guy that was able to put quite a bit of power on rocks about, the size of a potato. So it's so like I was legitimately concerned, and so I took him aside. It was like, you don't, you're dodging and the rocks are flying right past you. No. I mean, that could have, and it would have been a complete and total accident on his part, but he could have killed me.
Mm-hmm.
And it probably would have been something like involuntary manslaughter. I guarantee you, like he wasn't. I know that was not his goal, but he just did not think throwing rocks around other people bad idea. So then you go and you think, well, what is it that you can do? And ultimately, the only thing I could do in that situation was, drum up, turn on actor Matt, pretend to be mad at the situation myself, and then I was like, yeah, this is absolutely horrible. Let's go put the rocks right into that box where they belong. Let's go put those rocks into that box right where they belong. Let's go. Okay.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, exactly. And
then it worked. It worked because then somehow I got him to focus and channel his energy into, instead of throwing rocks randomly and all sorts of flailing, to somehow direct his frustration until the situation had subsided.
Yeah, exactly.
And he didn't think anything of it. He didn't even realize that he had put anyone in danger.
Mm-hmm. And this is something I think because feelers have this monkey brain, very very active. Everyone has the monkey brain.
We all have it, and it was all very active. But the layers that it takes to get to it, and the means by which one gets to it is very different.
Well, and the way someone functions with how someone kind of reacts to their own monkey brain, how does it play into their life? A thinker's monkey brain is there, but it's much less overt, right? It's not just, oh well, there's the monkey. I'm not, oh yeah, he Snapchats me back, not just very transparent, just monkey brain, just out and about.
It's oftentimes because showing it and just having it be so bare and bold faced isn't necessarily conducive to accomplishing what we set out to do.
Well, right.
Or at least in my case, I don't know, maybe it might be a little bit different for someone an ENTP as opposed to an ENTJ or an INTJ.
Sure. It's different. I'd say I have probably more just because I have FE. I feel like maybe not because of FE, but in general, I think ENTPs maybe have...
Well, you're more expressive responsive in general.
Right, and we're...
Mr. Beers is here.
Awesome. Wonderful. But yeah, the feelers, I feel have a more they get more feedback from their monkey brain. I think they get more powerful feedback. Everyone gets messages from their monkey brain, and everyone gets kind of these urges that come from them that we can later rationalize or not. But I think the feelers have a much more direct pipeline with the monkey brain. I just think they have they're more sensitive to it. Just it's like being sensitive to it. It's like being gluten sensitive. It's more in their life. It's something that, or it's just more transparent in general, a little bit stronger. I'm not going to go into the difference between how much, or I don't think it's going to be some significant difference, but I just think the monkey brain has a higher place of precedence within their kind of hierarchy of how they go about engaging in their worlds. Which is that's not some they're worse. They have the monkey brain. No, definitely there's a reason. There's a complete reason. This is really good for group functioning.
And if you were reading the chat, Mr. Beers said something quite, I think, and I might have a different take on it, because he said the monkey brain can express itself through a thinker's primary function, and I was thinking, well, with you, it would be easy as any. But then, but then I'm thinking about
my NE could definitely express my monkey brain.
Yeah,
in a way.
But I was thinking in terms of Caleb, his would be TI. But I'm thinking, okay, in terms of traits of Caleb's of which I'm jealous, I would probably say NE is more, at least for me, simply because it's the extroverted function. It's the way one actually goes and spits out whatever the other function does. Like for thinking types, the NE is for perceiving thinkers, what spits out whatever the TI conjures.
Right.
So I would say that yeah. I mean, like if you and I ever get into an intellectual male member measuring contest, at least in terms of conveying yourself in the moment, you have an incredible advantage.
Right.
NE is just worlds beyond.
Like, you're like Professor, right?
Yeah. NE makes you sound way more competent, way more believable, and because it goes and pulls from all sorts of different things, and basically does a more focused but high resolution thing of what NI does. It immediately winds up becoming relatable to whoever you're you're speaking with. So in
the end,
yeah.
And my mom, this is what my mom said, like a long time ago. Before I really knew much about Myers-Briggs, like, yeah, you can tell S's by the way they speak. Like the tone of the voice is like much more flat. She said, she's like, yeah, I just can tell an S right away. Like N's have this like intonation and like we really get into the intuitive like idea sense, putting more weight on ideas. While the S is just like, well, everything's important and they're all detailed, so I'll just relay them to you. But the N is like the Neil deGrasse Tyson, right? Like the convincing speaker that just sounds so intellectual and so smart or something.
And he definitely has NE. NETI. There's no or maybe he might even be an F type. He might even have
he could. I think he could be an F. He could be an F.
Like Michio Kaku is what? ENFP. And Neil deGrasse Tyson might be the same. I don't know.
But I think he could very
definitely
well be.
An intuitive.
Definitely an N. Just such an obvious N. For me, since they're public figures, it's sometimes hard for me to tell J versus P. But I think he could be a P. I think he's probably a P. Not definitely, but like I think there's a really good chance he's a P. I would guess E, maybe ENFP. But he could be an INFP at the same time. He could be an INTP for all I know. Like he could. I see a range of things that he could be, but I think an F, N definitely. I think a P, and then I think, I don't know, coin flip for E or I. It's hard to tell public personalities. What does Google say? Does it say anything?
Oh, I wasn't Googling. I was just writing in chat to Caleb. If you want to Google it, feel free.
All right. I will. I actually do. Yeah. Yes.
But yeah, we've been going for a bit over 2 hours, so let's close things up, and then perhaps we can invite Mr. Beers in if he would like to converse. If he doesn't want to converse. ENFJ. No wonder people like him so much.
This person says, okay.
But yes, if Mr. Beers isn't too tired or doesn't have something else to do, I think it'd be kind of nice to chat with him a little bit before bed, or rather before my day starts, or the rest of my day starts. Would you be down for that?
Yeah, or I would, of course. I'm assuming you were talking to me, but I don't know. Oh wait, you probably were talking to Caleb, weren't you?
No, I was just suggesting. I was asking you if you would be able to be around. Yeah, after stream chat.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yes, I will. I just said yes because I knew I was available, but yeah. Sometimes I'm not too wary of this antecedent, so that'll kick me.
So how can we conclude this? What would you like to conclude on?
Well, yeah, I would probably like to wrap up my thing on variance, because I did sort of like leave that trail.
Well, it's like you just keep on.
I was close.
You keep on doing these tangential things, and then you wind up having to go and drag all the loose ends and tie them together.
Everything, right? There's just so much that everything ties into. That it's like always a problem for me. That's why I like to do these. Like that's why I like to think about things, so I actually have like something to go do. But with the variance, so. Well, first, I'm just gonna throw things out because if I do start explaining, like I will get into more loops. But one thing I thought about, what it makes sense for fringe populations to have more variance, just because, well, genetically they're gonna have a different combination. Like they're gonna have a different, like there's something genetically that's making this person appear this way, and that likely comes with other things that are, one rare thing might be. With this weird specific genetic combination that's not a common one, that's these weird traits are coming out that aren't basically normal, then there's probably some other things that could be different as well, and so you see this variance, this large genetic variance. One big thing I was looking at or thinking about, I wasn't looking at anything but the wall.
But looking at, in other words, thinking about in somewhat of a visual sense.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it was like sort of just how the world is. So like, well, first of all, when people are social creatures, right? So we work in environments within each other. So there are what are optimal designs for environments? Well, people do generally. We like to, it's a thing we as people think. We like to treat people generally equally. So one person doesn't have more weight than the other when it's like, well, I'm going to make, it's like, I'm going to make all clothes as big as that, the guy who threw rocks. I'm going to make all clothes that size. So it screws everyone else who's smaller than him. Well, that wouldn't make much sense because you're going to get a large portion of people who can't, like their clothes are just going to be sagging on them. And it just doesn't make sense. It makes sense to cater to the average is my point. Basically, there's the largest majority of people who
there's more money in it.
Yeah. There's the largest majority, more money. It just makes most sense numbers-wise. Like, well, why would I want to help them, I want to accommodate the most people. So that's for Mace Windu. For that window, God, for that window thing I was talking about, like the threshold. Like, so when they're designing these windows for everyone that everyone has to try to get through, or ideally, they cater to the average because it doesn't make sense numerically to do anything else. So what you see is when there's variance, so average people become more average because they their world is sort of like the world is catered to them, and it's sort of like
it slashes off the fringe possibilities, so that the more you go through it, the more you get mainstreamed.
Yes, exactly. You get more mainstreamed. It's like an exact personality. Like if you're being, not personality. Like if you're a very average person in many ways, like things will just be easy for you because things have been catered to you. Like, oh well, this instruction manual is built. So someone like me perfectly can understand and read it and complete. Do the desk. This plane, I fit really nicely on it. Wow, I fit well in this car, or oh wow, like school's great. I actually, I learned things, and it's a good pace, and I'm not I'm not too fast, not too slow. But so what variance? I want to cover two ideas before we let off. But
I'm going to give you a hard cutoff of 7 minutes.
All right, cool. That's good. That'll be enough. But basically, so as you said, so like the average, they get caught by the average track. Like they fit in well. So like they're then guided by the average. So the average pulls together more average. And then there's this area of people who kind of get pulled by the average, right? Because they're close enough to average, but so I'm talking about
the people that don't get pulled by the average don't wind up having as much to sway them in that general direction because the average path isn't anywhere near compelling and they haven't gotten sucked in from the beginning.
Exactly. So that's more opportunity for variance. And then when I was thinking specifically, so that just more variance upon variance is kind of compounded in this. I was thinking about
branching.
Well, it just branches out I was like, well, that's definitely a mechanism that's in play here. Like, and then I was just thinking about advice, like just when because people give people advice often, right? Like that's a huge thing. Like we help each other out, like we're humans, right? Like it's a big deal for us. Advice, if you're average, is just, I think, good. Like it's much easier to come across good advice, right? It's like, because all the like platitudinous cliche ass shit just applies perfectly to you, right?
Yeah,
like,
there aren't as many contingencies that need to be considered because everything is already so homogenized, and so the machine just kind of keeps on feeding on itself and churning out average.
Exactly. Like, so when you like, it's like, hey, it's like, so like, the career counseling is going to be easy. It's like, oh, you're this.
Do A, do B, do C, you will get D.
It's like, you're this Myers-Briggs type. You'll really enjoy professions in this, and like you're perfectly well suited, and like it's really good for you. And they're like, oh, okay, I'll do that. Like they fit in, and just general advice. Because advice, when you give advice on
5 minutes.
Yeah. Like this is the first thing that came to my mind. So forgive me for like how poor it is, but it's like, when I if I'm talking to my barber and I'm like, and my barber would not be giving me like, how to, grow healthy dreadlocks. Like it wouldn't make sense to give me that advice because it's specific advice for people with a specific type of hair. Maybe I could get it would be bad. It'd be like a travesty. And so when you're giving advice, like a general advice, like not to a specific person, because obviously if you're giving advice to a person, you want to consider what's going on with them. But if you're giving general advice, it just makes sense to say things that probably work for that. Like in studying, study for the test, you'll do well. Oh, go to college. It's probably going to do, it'll probably work for you, etc. Like this general advice, but if you're average, a lot of the general advice like hits dead on, and it's like straight up good stuff that you. So like instantly you're guided, right? And then so before we let off the what I was interested in was, so if we're looking at another thing, so that's to sum it up, another area for more variance. The variant get more variant, the average, they're pulled more in. And I'm sure there's some threshold where it goes either way. And I'm sure, yeah, like that'd be interesting to think about. Maybe talk about after stream, but
yeah.
But I have probably an idea of, or I think that would be, but what, and then gifted populations in school, what I found, so I was thinking about pacing. If you just work, so for an average kid in school, they just get the work, they do the work at their own pace, they pay attention in class, and they learn it, and they do, whatever, they do well, or decently on the tests, etc. And things just, they're paced very well. The problem, so for the threshold problem for special ed kids is the pacing's bad, like it's too fast. But then on the other hand, when you have the people where it's too slow, there's this whole other dimension added to school. It's like, well, if I can travel, if they're a car that can travel 50 miles an hour and I can go 200 miles an hour, and that's our sustained, like, nice pace that we want to go, and you give me a 200-mile course, I'm going to finish in an hour, and it's going to take that person 4 hours. I'm going to have 3 hours to just piddle around. Or I could work really in it. So what you lose there is efficiency at the top end. Is essentially you're not paced well. You end up like spurts. Like I work in spurts. Like I'm like, well, if I sit in class and pay attention the whole time, I will go crazy because it's so slow. But if I don't pay attention at all, at least I have something to learn. Like and then I can learn at my own pace for like a little bit of a time. And so you learn in these inefficient spurts, and it also creates more freedom. And the freedom contributes to variance as well. So like I have decisions to do with what to do with my time because things aren't so mapped out in my life. I could do this. Oh, I could just go smoke weed after school. Ooh. Oh, I could do some random thing that would not be on the average person's mind because they don't have that time.
Minute and a half.
The freedom sort of exacerbates variance. And yeah, so that was pretty interesting for me to think about. And I thought about this for quite a while, and it was just interesting to think that, like, okay, well, more with, just directly kind of logically train how with more freedom and more variance and like how it all combined together. Obviously, it's not super fun by itself or anything, but like, It's just interesting and how people work in systems. And I had another analogy that I won't go. That was about a like dog sled team. I used that, and I was thinking with N being the number of dogs and increasing the number of dogs, and then having one really big strong dog and how that functions within the group when it changes sizes and stuff, etc. But whatever, I'll leave that for whoever wants to go have fun with that. I'm sure the implications for the analogy are not too like unexpected or anything. But yeah, that's all. I'm done on my rant.
Oh, it's not bad to have the rant. The thing is just that I need to go pee.
that is pressing, isn't it? That's not something you're gonna go on.
Yeah, or more squeezing. Actually, the detrusor muscle is doing the squeezing thing.
I see.
I mean, I don't exactly have anything pressing on my stomach. So anyhow, having all these squeezing pressures pushing me to stop the stream. I'm going to thank you for showing up, and I'm going to thank everyone else who sat through, and I hope that it happened to be valuable for us all. I know I certainly enjoyed it.
I know it was for me.
I enjoyed everything except for like the last half an hour, because then I started thinking more about holding my pee than actual content.
Yes, that detracts from it, yeah.
I don't dare laugh anymore. So, talk to you later. Yeah.